Hey guys, welcome to Ringsiders. I'm joined once again by George Napolitano. How you doing, George?
Very well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. We had another message from Kerry to say hello again.
Okay, I haven't seen him in a while. We talk once a week or so, but it's been a while since I've actually seen him in person.
Yeah, he's. We're speaking to him again this week on Thursday, I believe. So we shall. We'll pass your regards on to him.
Yes, he does his posters and his thing and his podcast. He's very busy.
He's a busy man. I was going to jump straight in because obviously we spoke a lot of the old school last time, and I was looking for some photos today. And there's a guy I wanted to ask you about who I know people are indifferent on him at times. Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah.
Crazy. I always wanted to see Abdullah because every time I saw Abdullah, I knew I had a cover. And he knew I had a cover picture waiting. It was always exciting, and he brought you into the match also.
Yeah.
By that I mean, one time we were in Puerto Rico, and he's giving me the finger, come closer to the ring. I said, no, come closer. And he reaches his arm out of the ring, and I'm down below him, and he lifts me up on my shirt, lifts me up, puts me on the apron, and puts my head through the ropes in a match in Puerto Rico. Yes. But so I tried staying away from him, but it wasn't always possible because he would always look around. He would look left and go right, which most people, if you look left, you go left.
Yeah.
He was hard to read to see where he was actually going to wind up and where he was going to go.
Wow.
He was very exciting. People have all different opinions of him, but if you were a wrestling fan in the 70s, in the 80s, Abdullah was the guy. I mean,
yeah.
Abdullah was what ECW was invented for. I mean, he was ECW before ECW.
He was. Was there ever, I don't know, I always heard there was there ever talk of him and Hogan, like bringing him in as a major heel to face Hogan at some point?
So supposedly the story goes that they were afraid, they being the WWF were afraid of Abdullah, and they were afraid they couldn't control him and what he does. But he would have had a great match because he would have done what he had to do against Hogan, and it would have been no problem, and it would have been very exciting. Hogan never really faced a guy like Abdullah in the States, that is.
Yeah. Would you? I'm going to ask as well because I'm a huge fan of Bruiser Brody. I know he had many classics with Abdullah. Was you ever at any of those matches? Did you get to be a part of those?
Of course, I was at many of them. In fact, I was at a couple in Puerto Rico, and I think I was in one in Texas. It's crazy. I mean, they fought all the way into the dressing room, and they were on top of each other. In one of the books I did, or a couple of books I did, there's definitely pictures of Abdullah against Brody, and it's Puerto Rico mostly, very bloody, very gory.
Yeah.
Just crazed, and they both wouldn't let up. This was it. It was something where they just kept on going, and neither would give up or let up for any second.
Yeah, I've always been a massive fan of Brody. It's always nice to hear a few stories about it. I mean, obviously, tragic what happened to him, but I know obviously if you had been around him, what was he like as just a normal person?
Well, firstly, when I was around him more was when he was in the WWF, almost when he first started, and he was a lot calmer than he became later. In fact, a bunch of times I used to drive him to Nassau Coliseum or some of the local spots. If he was on him, I would pick him up in the city and drive him, and we would talk. And he always talked about being a sports reporter.
Yeah.
That's what he would talk to me about baseball and about football, and he was a reporter for a newspaper, and he liked that because that's what I did in a different way as a reporter, and that's what he would talk about. He would talk about real things, and then at the end of the night, I would drive him back to the city, and we would go to a Spanish restaurant which was serve Mexican food. He would love eating this Mexican food at the Spanish restaurant. That was before the days where it was just Mexican restaurants. There were very few and far between in the 70s.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like in the 70s now. And I would take him to eat and then take him to the Howard Johnson or the Ramada or wherever he may have been staying. And many times, if I went to Dallas, I would tell him, "Hey, I'm coming this weekend." He says, "I'll have a ride for you." I said, "No, it's okay. I'll have a ride waiting for you." And when I got off the plane, invariably there was somebody waiting for me to pick me up to take me to the arena. It happened in Houston. Happened in Dallas.
Amazing. Yeah, I've always I'm a huge fan. So it's always nice to get a few stories. But I saw a picture earlier, though, you mentioned in Texas. I'm going to presume as well you was around the Von Erichs in that era.
Oh, that was in world class, and
yeah, I mean
that became sort of his home, so to say,
yeah.
in his home territory, and he stayed in world class, and then did his Japan shots and other places, based off of being in Texas, being home.
What was it like, obviously, being around the Von Erichs as well in that time? Because you hear stories that they were as big as the Beatles in Texas.
Well, that's what it was, because they were young and good looking and energetic, and they did a lot of acrobatic stuff. They did things that you weren't seeing. But mostly, all of the opponents of the Von Erichs and what have you, they're all at the same age bracket. Yep. All youngish, and all in shape, good looking guys. So they got this younger crowd, which wasn't the Texas crowd, the old tobacco chewing. So they got a younger crowd, and that's how world class got built up, because of the younger crowd having guys that really could wrestle. David was a great wrestler. I mean, and then Kevin, I remember, I took pictures of his first match. I was there, and I was going back to San Antonio with Jose Lothario, a wrestler. Yeah. And they asked me, "Would you please, this is Kevin's first match, would you give us photos?" So I was there for Kevin's first match in the Sportatorium.
That's incredible. That's I love that era and stuff, and I always like to learn about these guys. I mean, what was it like? Well, obviously Kerry went on to sign for Vince. What was Kerry like? What was your thoughts on being around Kerry Von Erich?
Well, Kerry was a perfect champion look. He had the great look, and he could wrestle. He can do many different things. He can get tough when he had to get tough, and he could wrestle when he had to wrestle, which he did. And he had the look. He had the look of a champion. He was perfect. But when he went to the WWF, and it's when he had this accident, and for many years nobody really knew that he had one foot. I mean, there's so many different stories about that. And to watch him now and to know that he did that with one foot, really, with a prosthetic, I mean, which at that time was unheard of, sort of. I mean, people had it, yes, but it wasn't something that you heard of or you actually could do a lot of things with.
You couldn't tell as well, obviously, when he's in the ring working. You couldn't tell he was that good. So
yeah.
I always heard the story that I think Roddy Piper was one of the only few that knew the true story. But
yeah, well, think of how good he could have been then, really.
Yeah. Oh God, yes, yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't good. He was very good. Could have been even better, probably, if he had 2 feet on the ground. I mean, not taking anything away from him. I mean, he was great the way he was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just sidetracking as well. I was asked by a friend the other week as well that asked me to ask you, because we're British, he wanted to know what it was like being around Davey Boy Smith. If you was ever around British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith.
1 second. Okay, there you are. I thought I lost you. To be honest, Davey Boy Smith. Here he goes again. I'm sorry. I don't know if you lost me. I'm back.
I can see you, George. You're there.
Okay. Yeah, Davey Boy Smith. I was never really with him. So I can't say other than what I seen in the ring. That was during the time, mid 80s, when I didn't have free reign to really go in the dressing room, hang out, travel. And that's when they started doing so many big shows that they could have been in New York tonight and tomorrow they're in Dallas. I mean, they went right to the airport. There was not as much free time hanging out afterwards. So I never really got to know Davey Boy. I saw him better when he was in WCW. That's after his WWF run. Was in WCW. And I ain't gonna say I became close with him, but I know a couple times I went to his room, we did pictures and what have you. And I talked with him then more than I did when his big reign in the WWF. But he was very nice. I know he used to do pranks on people and what have you. I never experienced anything like that, but
no, I was asked to ask. I was asked to ask because you do hear about all the stories and the jokes and the ribs. But I just had to sidetrack. But back to Texas though, because I do want to ask. Obviously, you was around the Von Erichs. That means you must have been around the Freebirds.
Oh yeah, Michael.
Yes. Michael, I mean, what was that experience like?
Okay, when I first saw them, they were on Atlanta TV, TBS, and I said, "These guys are good." I mean, they were just colorful and they were good. They did crazy moves, rock and roll moves. They were a '70s act in the '70s. Yeah, they were perfect for their time. And Michael loved the idea of him being a rock star. He wanted to be a rock star. And I remember that they did a record. Michael did a record.
Yes, he did.
And that was going to be their entrance music. And one of I can't remember exactly when, but one of the shows at the Texas Stadium, afterwards they had the premiere record release party for the song. It was in Irving, Texas, right after the show at the Texas Stadium. They had a record release party, which I was at. And he went on stage and he was dancing and doing his thing. But Michael was a character. Terry Gordy was just a good, rough, rugged wrestler. He was good. The brawl with Brody and Abdullah and Kamala and anyone else like that. And Buddy Roberts was like the third guy. He could have been like their manager, so to say. And whenever it was a good tag team, there was always the one that was big, and then you had the secondary guy for a tag team. That was Buddy Roberts. Not to take anything away from him. He was good in his place with the Freebirds. But Michael, to me, was the show. He was perfect for his place and his time. I still remember that party. It was a great party. And he got on stage, he was dancing and singing. And a guy named Jimmy Papa was, I want to say he was the drummer, and he was my photographer in Texas if I needed something. And he was Michael's friend. So I used to get pictures when I wasn't there from him, because he was there and he was good friends with Michael, and he's the one who produced the record and put the record together.
So I'm guessing it's true then that Michael PSA knows how to party. I mean,
yes, he did, and he always did. but seeing them on TBS, I wanted to see them in person, because I knew, again, looking ahead, I knew they were a good cover shot, and I remember I took a great shot of the three of them with their face painted in something which is no good now, in the rebel flag.
Yeah.
which is against the law these days. But they dressed and they put makeup, and it was the rebel flag on all three. Great. It was a great look, and they came out ready to kick. And it was really good.
And what was it like, obviously, being around that feud, the Von Erichs, the Freebirds? I mean, what was it like being there?
Well, that was just one match of a whole card's worth of big matches. So it wasn't just the Von Erichs against the Freebirds. It could have been the two Freebirds, Buddy Roberts and Michael, and Terry Gordy in his singles match against Kamala. I mean, they were just really, really good at what they did. Yeah. And they fit the mold of the world class. They were the same age, again, youngest in the young mold, and perfect for their time.
Yeah. Now you mentioned as well, obviously I wasn't going to mention him, but you mentioned the name because we lost him, I think, this year, Kamala. I mean, what was it like being around Kamala?
when I think of Kamala, I think of Independent Show, Brooklyn, and I had my son, and my son wanted to meet Kamala, my son Joe, and he put face paint on himself. It was Kamala 2, and a midget who was the Haiti kid, Kamala 3, and my son. And I took the picture of Kamala. He was just really quiet, reserved, gentle, very, very sweet guy. Really, really nice. I mean, as opposed to the character that he played, he was just he was a sweetheart, really nice, and he never bothered anybody or did anything that he shouldn't have done. He was just really, really nice, and that's one of my favorite pictures. It's in one of my books. My son with the Kamala 1, 2, and 3, and Kamala 2 was Malumba, I believe his name was, and he would wrestle in Japan when Kamala couldn't make the spot. He would do it, but they knew it was not the Kamala, but he was another Kamala.
Yeah,
that was before Kamala. When you think Kamala, you think of Friday, the guy with the hat, and Friday, and in Brooklyn and New York they had I forgot, there was another guy with them. There were 3 of them, and I don't remember. Harvey Whippleman.
Oh, Harvey Whippleman, yes.
That's who I was thinking, tip of my tongue. The Rock's friend, and I couldn't get the out of my mouth.
Yes. Do you think as well? Obviously, I mentioned Abdullah earlier. Do you think Kamala could have been another guy Hogan could have made money with back in the 80s?
There's no reason why. There's no reason why he couldn't have. It was perfect character to go against the American, the all-American guy, Hulk Hogan. I mean, really. They missed the boat on Kamala. They got him later, and he just didn't have the drive, or it wasn't as strong as it would have been a couple of years earlier. That's all.
Yeah, because obviously when he came in, he was in the feud with the Undertaker, wasn't he? When when they brought him in, another Texas guy. I'm presuming you may have seen Undertaker before he was the Undertaker.
I remember him when he started, Mark Callis, as in WCW, and before that, and he just was a big guy, big, tall, lanky guy. Didn't think that he was going to be this legendary figure when I saw him. He was good. He was big. He was a nice guy. Yeah, but you just didn't think he was going to become this esteemed character that had evolved over so many years.
What was it like photographing him, though? I mean, it must have been a fantastic photo opportunity with a guy like that. Yes, the Undertaker.
Yeah, but Undertaker, I kind of knew his moves, so he wasn't hard to photograph because I knew he was going to go up on the top rope. I kind of knew when, not because I had a headset on, just because I was watching and seeing and doing, and I was able to read his moves. So I got a lot of good pictures. The hardest part was to get him in the entry because it was so dark.
Yeah.
So I never got to my own liking. I love that photo that was the one in the opening. The opening on TV was much better than it looked like in film. Just couldn't capture it as good as you can see it for the opening.
Yeah. Yeah. I did see a photo. I was looking at some photos today, and I didn't speak of the Undertaker. I saw a picture of yourself with Paul Bearer. Another guy who was a notorious joker. I mean, you got any Paul Bearer stories?
Paul Bearer, not really, but again, he's another guy I met in Texas, Percy Pringle. That's where I met him, and then when he came into the WWF, we were friends already, and he was just, again, all of these guys were nice to me, and I did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 magazines a month. So maybe they're nice because I did that many magazines and they wanted to be in it. But no, they just generally were really nice. I never saw them go out of their way to be nasty to anybody or do anything that they shouldn't.
It's quite incredible as well when you think about the amount of talent that's come from Texas.
Oh, yeah. Texas. Well, that goes back to the early days. I mean, my first time in Texas, I met at Houston, I met Jose Lothario, who befriended me and became friends forever. And then I would spend my summers at San Antonio with Jose's house. I think I might have told you this before.
I think you briefly, yes.
And I would travel with Jose to all these different towns, Corpus Christi and Galveston, just different places. I went to Mexico with him. I mean, in Laredo, he used to run the promotion. He had his own ring. He was his promotion in Laredo. And I remember one year he had Gino Hernandez, another Texas guy. Yeah. Gino Hernandez and Dos Caras, Alberto Del Rio's father.
Yes.
Dos Caras, the brother of Mil, living at the house with me and my wife and my dog. And they would train every day in the Texas heat. And then on Sundays, they would go to Laredo and wrestle. I mean, I did this for like 5 years straight.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Obviously, speaking of Texas as well, I'd be remiss if I don't think I've asked you before about him. Being around Terry Funk, I get the feeling Terry's a character.
I always think first things I remember about Terry are the ECW days. People remember how great how great a wrestler he was. But I remember the ECW days, and I remember telling him, Terry, how can you do these things? I mean, it's crazy what you're doing. It's just, I could still do it. I could still do it. I said, but it's crazy, these things you do with these people. And he just loved it. I remember one year I did a book, and I put Terry in the section that said all-time greats. It said all-time greats. And it was Lute Dez, Vern Gagne, Buddy Rogers, and I included Terry Funk, all-time greats. I give him the book. He says, "Why you giving me this for? Do I look effing dead to you?" He had retired, and then by then he was an all-time great. He had retired. He retired a lot of times. So I put him in the section of the all-time greats, and he got on me. He hated it. I mean, hated it in Terry's way, that he was included in the all-time greats. And he said, do I look effing dead to you? I mean, really? It was funny.
I love it. Because obviously you have Terry and you have Dory, and I get the feeling Dory's a lot more quieter.
I didn't see Dory as much as I saw Terry. Terry traveled around more. Dory was more of the wrestler. Dory was quiet. He wrestled a lot of places. I remember them in Puerto Rico. I seen them in New York too. But Dory was the wrestler. Yep. Terry was the brawler.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you might think about Jimmy Jack Funk, but no, he was just a guy when they couldn't get Dory. They invented a third Funk in the WWF for a while.
Yeah, I briefly. Yeah, do you know I completely forgot about Jimmy Jack Funk? Yeah, just there's a blast from the past. But I've always wondered about Terry. Did you see him? And like you said, I mean, did you ever get to ECW? What did you think of ECW?
I went all the time. I mean, it was insane. It was what I would see in Texas, what I would see in Puerto Rico, but in Philadelphia at a small arena. And if you were a fan back in those days and you didn't go to the ECW arena and you looked at the pictures in the magazine and what have you, you thought this was this enormous place with these big thing. And yet it was a place that held 800 people.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize that. I thought it held a few thousand.
Yeah. Well, if it held 800, it was a lot of people. It was full, but it was built up to be bigger than what it was. And really, what it was I'm not going to say that I invented it or Bill Apter or any of the other writers, but the way we wrote about it and made the fan think it was this major, huge, big promotion. When in fact it was an independent promotion that ran every couple weeks, a couple spots in different places. I mean, really, and today it's got this iconic remembrance, but it wasn't an every night of the week promotion. And they didn't wrestle every week. But fans who didn't know better would think of what it was. Yeah. I mean, I do know this because when the people from Japan came over and they said, "This ECW arena?" they were mystified because they were thinking this big place like the Garden. And they didn't they didn't know what they were doing. You know, I'm talking about fans that would come to see ECW because now it was such a big deal in people's mind. And still to this day, it's still talked about like being what it was. And it was what it was.
Yeah.
And
it certainly left its mark on the industry.
Yeah. But prior to that, you had I seen barbed wire matches in Puerto Rico with the flames, and I seen exploding death matches in Japan where the ring goes up and flames come out. I mean, they didn't do that in ECW. They did a little, but other places were doing it before ECW did it. And Texas Death Match in Texas with the chains between the two in the 70s. I remember Terry Funk in many chain match in the 70s, and Abdullah, what have you. And you saw these in the 70s, early 80s, before ECW, which was in the 90s.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
What was obviously you're going to ECW? Did you get to meet and be around Paul Heyman then? What was Paul like?
Well, Paul, as a young boy, he's younger than me, but Paul actually should take pictures for my magazine.
Oh wow! Okay.
I knew him. I mean, everybody knew him. He was a young, brash kid, and he wasn't popular with the other photographers. For me, we were friendly. We were friends. I liked Paul. And that's why when he did this ECW thing, I had free reign to do whatever I wanted to do because he knew, he knew what he knew. And he was just a kid who always wanted to be involved in wrestling. And he did what he wanted to do. I mean, he went for it and did it. Like Jim Cornette, who also started as a photographer in Lexington.
Yes, he did. It's just, I mean, did it surprise you? So you're not surprised then to how far Paul's come now then, that he's as high up as he is?
Because he knows history, he knows what to do, and he's got this background of stuff in his mind about the business. He's just been the business. And ECW should have been a little more successful than it was. It was successful, but just to go back to them, their ruination was when they tried to travel around the country.
Yeah.
And when they tried to travel around the country, they couldn't really sell out these big buildings that they were booking themselves into. And they had 20, 25, 30 plane tickets, which was an expense. And and not selling out the building, they really couldn't do it. And that's how it really went down. They would have just stayed local and just did what they did. They would have kept the money and did better. But Paul knew what he wanted to do. He knew about Puerto Rico. He knew about Japan. And he did something which was a mixture of this thing. Being branded ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, which was originally Eastern Championship Wrestling. And he went for it and was successful in what he did when he did it.
Yeah, so I remember that video where Shane Douglas won the title and threw it down and declared Extreme Championship Wrestling, and they're off to the races, so to speak. I remember that very much. It was an interesting time.
Well, I used to love going there, and in this hotbed building, it was hot as hell.
I can imagine.
You didn't want to go there in the summer night. It was really bad, and I want to say it was every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not exactly sure anymore. I think it was every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I knew I was driving to Philadelphia, which I had driven in the 70s when WWF taped every 3 weeks, Philadelphia, and then they taped every 3 weeks. They went to Allentown, and then the next night to Hamburg. I would make the trip every 3 weeks religiously to get the new guys that were coming in, to get the new feuds, to get the new angles that were going to be seen in Madison Square Garden and Boston and what have you.
Brilliant. Before I start to wrap things up as well, I wanted to ask you a question, and it's I'm just shooting straightforward. There was a lot of talk the other week, obviously, with all the WWE releases and stuff, about is Vince preparing to sell? Do you think Vince will ever sell?
No. I can't see it. I can't see it. And then some smart people think that they're going to sell, and then what they're doing is they're rebuilding NXT so that will be the promotion that they'll push going forward, so they'll still have a wrestling promotion. But I've heard that from people who don't know,
Mm.
just from people. This is not from any real source. Don't know that, but I can't see that he's really going to sell. He's already quote sold in its own right the library to
Yeah.
Peacock Network, and he's making billions on that. What's he selling? I mean, come on.
I agree. I don't think he will ever sell. I think Vince will be there till the day they bury him.
You know, and if they had to, they have this other thing that they can. That's not that's part of it, but not. Is NXT WWE? Not really. It's NXT.
Yep.
So but so they position themselves to have something else.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't think he'll ever give up the reins. I mean, like I said, he's 75, going on 76. And he's still very much hands-on now. I don't think it'll ever change.
Well, what's your impression of AEW?
I enjoy AEW. I'm a wrestling fan, so I watch as much as I can. I do enjoy AEW. I do sometimes wish there'd be less flips and more storytelling, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's what they think people want to see that watches AEW. I mean, that's what they're catering to, sort of say.
Yeah.
And then it's like me asking you the questions. And what do you think of the AEW getting with Impact?
It's interesting. It's good for wrestling that we're getting potential dream matches. These companies working together. I'm on board with it. I'd like to see where it goes because I know there was talks of WWE and New Japan as well, wasn't they? Maybe having some kind of a relationship.
Well, in Japan, WWE always had some kind of relationship with New Japan, going back to the Inoki days.
Mm.
They always did. They would bring in Inoki, Fujinami, and a couple of Sakaguchi and a couple others in from New Japan all the time. They always had some kind of a relationship, so to say. So yeah, but New Japan also wants a relationship with AEW. I think.
Very true. I saw that as well. This is it. I like the idea of companies working together because to me wrestling wins at the end of the day.
And then any opinion that AEW, Tony Khan, AEW, has a piece of Impact? What do you think about that?
I've heard people mentioning that they think Tony Khan's going to buy Impact at some point, but I don't think he will. But I like the idea of them working together. I'm a big fan of Don Callis as well. I like Don Callis being involved.
But I think the idea that maybe they already own a piece of it. Otherwise, why would they put Impact on TV? They're not if they really don't have their hand in the pot.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a very good point. I wonder if other companies might get involved as well. I mean, obviously, Ring of Honor are out there, and there's MLW coming up. I mean, these other companies potentially all work together, but
if they work together, and would be good. If they don't, try to fight each other. By fighting each other, I mean booking shows on the same day when when MLW's having a show. Don't book another pay-per-view.
Exactly. Yes.
What you're doing is you're killing yourself. You're fighting against yourself. You're going to work together. Know when each other's having dates and work it that way. The way the NWA was actually.
Yeah.
A new organization comprised of these other groups of people.
Yep, I like the sound of that. But one final question: do you think Vince would ever work with Tony Khan?
Vince wants to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
So to work with Tony Khan, Vince wouldn't give up what he may have as the head. Whereas Tony Khan working with Impact, he's working with guys who are still trying to get up that ladder, still trying to do something. There's a difference. Working together. If Vince worked together with them, he in fact is really going to own them more than working with them. Like he did with. People say he owned, quote unquote, owned ECW at the end.
Yes, yeah, I heard that as well. Yeah.
So it's hard to say. And this goes back to wrestling history. I think the biggest mistake, or no, I can't say that biggest, but a mistake that the Crockett's made was when the Crockett's Mid-Atlantic bought UWF, Watts' territory.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did is they merged it instead of keeping it separate. They took the best talent from UWF and just dissolved it. What did he buy then? He bought the contract for Sting and a couple other guys, Eddie Gilbert and a couple others, but nothing else. They just bought it, and then UWF ceased to exist. But if it could have continued to go on, if kept that way.
Yep, I agree. Could have kept it going. I totally agree. Totally agree. I'm going to let you go, George, because I know we've gone about 40, 45 minutes. I know I can always talk to you forever. I would love to get you back in a couple of weeks if that's okay, because I'd love to talk more territory with you.
Okay. Anytime you want, just let me know, and I'll do it. I'll try to do it, and we can get together.
Absolutely, because I'm a big fan of the Mid-South territory, so hopefully we could maybe talk a bit Mid-South next time you come on.
Mid-South, UWF, which became UWF.
Excellent. We'll definitely do that. But George, it's always a pleasure. I genuinely cannot thank you enough. This means more to me than you'll ever know. So for now, George Napolitano, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you.